I don't believe the pandemic is an answer to prayer. I mean,
Right.
those are I mean, I wish it would have never happened. I wish
Right.
it'd go away rapidly. But I think that God is gracious, and even in really difficult circumstances, some beautiful things can emerge, and we've certainly experienced some of that.
It's been a while since people have been together.
Yeah.
Are they ready to get back? Are you ready to have that in person?
That's a great question, Adam. I think I would answer it like this. I think there is a deep hunger because we're made for community. This is we're made. It's not good for us to be alone. I mean,
Right.
we're made for that, and as Christians, we worship an incarnate Savior. So I mean, matter matters to us.
Right.
This
Right.
is a big deal,
Uh-huh.
and so I mean, there's just something in our bone marrow, in our hearts, that wants to be gathered as the people. There's plenty of caution, and so it's one of those things of sort of a mixed
Right.
a mixed thing, which I think we have to honor and recognize. And so we've been through a weird time. It's
Weird, yes.
Yes, so we've been, and we're in the middle of it, and so it's mixed.
How do you think the national church did through this? This was, it was a lot of change for
Yeah.
a lot of churches. You've got big churches who,
Rapidly.
you never want to lose that connection with people. How do you think the national church handled this, adapted to this?
I think this is an interesting story because the vast majority of churches pivoted within just a few days. If you think about that, I mean, the millions of people involved in that, and the millions of touch points and congregations, that's remarkable. I've thought about that a lot, and I think it's because churches have both sort of a commitment to some fixed things and some things that they can be really flexible about. A church is a culture, and so, I mean, beliefs, we didn't change our beliefs. We didn't change our values. We didn't change our major ambition. We had to alter how we did some of our practices. We had to alter some of our short-term plans. But we could be flexible in those areas and pivot, but they're pivoted from a rooted place. And I really think that's the secret to why so many churches did it successfully.
Do you feel like the church was targeted in certain areas, and how do you go about remedying that?
Yeah. I think first of all, we're extremely blessed in our community. Our Mayor Deaver, Judge Felton, they've been fantastic to work with. I think they've been very respectful of church leaders, and I think church leaders have been very respectful of them. So we're extraordinarily blessed. I think in a complicated situation, in a crisis, some people are going to make some mistakes. There have been some churches and pastors that have made some mistakes. I think some local governments have made some mistakes, and that's unfortunate. I'm concerned on a global scale. I was in a meeting recently with 21 Wilberforce, Baptist World Alliance. 25% of just Baptists live in places where persecution is at a high or a high level, and and they're concerned. Leaders in those areas are concerned that maybe where they have made some headway, some of that will not continue. In most situations, you've seen really healthy cooperation between religious leaders and community leaders, and that's awesome. I mean, that's we've got different responsibilities, but we love some of the same people, and we care about the same people, and we have their common good in mind, and I mean that's big.
Going forward, do you think coronavirus, COVID-19 has left a lasting mark on congregational worship? Hug a neck, you shake hands, the piano's playing, everybody's talking.
Right.
Is that coming back?
Oh, Adam, I think that's probably I probably need a layered answer to that.
Right.
I think that I'm nervous about anybody who says this is how this will change forever. As churches begin to gather again, it will be in very modified ways. There'll be things that people have experienced, some of them 6-7 decades of living, that they won't experience in the same way for a season. And who knows how long that season is? We don't know. For instance, it's going to be very difficult to have choirs, children's messages like churches have had them. I mean, So a lot of that will, for the short term, for sure change, and some of that possibly is altered long term, like passing an offering plate. I mean, that's sort of a holdover anyway. I mean, it's not, most people don't contribute to their churches in that manner, but we do it as an appropriate response or an act of worship. And we haven't done that in weeks and weeks and weeks, but people have still given offerings to the Lord. So, I mean, some things are just going to change because, okay, yeah, maybe it's time to change that.
Right. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. You're saying it may cause things to change, but it's also offered us an opportunity to step back and say, what could we have changed anyway? What things need to change?
Well, sometimes just your circumstances just give you an opportunity to look at the whole thing, and things are altered because they need to be, given the current circumstances and situations. And something that we just hadn't thought about, like we hadn't had like really principled discussions about whether we still need to pass the plate or not.
Right.
We haven't done it in a long time now, and so now we have to talk about, like, is this something that we really need to do? It's like, oh, is that in the book of Leviticus? It's not in there at all. I mean, it makes.
Where's the offering plate? What chapter?
Yeah, I mean, that's not the point.
Right.
That's not the point. And so, some of those things I think naturally will modify. Some things will come back. Some things will. Yeah, I mean, I think the answer right now is who knows.
President Trump the other day declared church as an essential industry. And I'm sure there's a lot of ways to look at it. Is it political? Is it not? Is he appeasing his base? But strip all that away. Yeah. Do you think church was essential through the pandemic? Do you think the function of the church?
That's a big old question, right? A couple of things. I think it'd probably be very unwise for me to politicize the worship of God.
Right.
That didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I don't know what motivated him to do that. I have no idea, and I don't want to really wade into that water. Secondly, the idea of the essentialness of worship as a Christian. I believe that Jesus said the church is my church, and so that settles it for me. Right. A broader question about what is essential. We've had all these kind of conversations in our communities. I think the church has done things that broadly people have all recognized were essential functions. We've provided child care for essential workers. Right. Well, a lot of churches do that. For-profit child care. Some of them are stayed in business, some of them not. I can tell you what, we help underwrite child care, right. So those kind of things. I mean, feeding it, those are essential things. But to a broader kind of thing, I was reading C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves. He's talking about friendship. And he said, friendship has no survival value. You can live your whole life without having a friend, right? He said it has no survival value. So when we're talking about what is essential, are we talking about purely survival? And then he goes on and says, but friendship gives value to survival. And so I think after a prolonged sort of quarantining, you begin to realize that there are some things that give value to survival that are pretty essential things too.